Welcome folks to another edition of Photo Australia. This morning we have Jackie Allender with us. Jackie is the Secretary of the South Australian Photographic Federation, and we're just going to go over what's going on in the world of SAPF and touch on a few other things. So welcome, Jackie.
Thank you. I'm honoured to be part of your Photo Australia.
Oh, glad to have you here.
Yeah, it's good. Thanks, Jackie. One thing I would like to ask is, I noticed that you mentioned that you've done a bit of education recently. Could you tell us a bit about what you've done and what you've achieved recently?
Okay, so I actually decided I would go and do the Certificate 3 at Martin Senior College. So I did that for a year, and then I decided I would go on to do the diploma at TAFE, the Diploma of Photography, which I've just recently finished. So I think a couple of weeks ago I got my parchment, so I'm very happy.
Yeah, well done. Well done.
Congratulations.
So how long did it take you to, roughly from start to finish? How long has this course been going? And what sort of the things that have been involved with it?
Well, the diploma took 12 months, so it was 12 months full-time, and that's the only thing that they actually offer. I know you can do each individual module at the CCP, Centre of Creative Photography. However, I just decided to go through TAFE. It was actually a really good learning curve. It sort of helped me refine my skills and fill in some blanks about, why, I love portraiture, so I do portraits and I love studio lighting, so it helped me with that. It allowed me to be a little bit more in tune with what's going on in the industry as well. Because obviously I was an older student. There was only one other person that was probably the same age or a little bit older than myself. Other than that, it was a lot of young people, so it was really refreshing to have that part of it. The modules themselves take you with some varied stuff. So videography was part of it, and obviously that's not my love, but it did force me to go and do something different. Apart from that, I just think it was a really good exposure. It made me look at history, made me look at other photographers. It made me have a look at a lot of different things that I hadn't maybe even looked at before. So I thought it was really good for my, just an overall general stuff. For me, it was about, I needed some qualifications. If I want to do anything with my photography, I felt that was an important side of it.
Jackie, just picking up on something you just touched on briefly there, the age of the participants. You said you were in the, shall we say...
Be careful here, Grant. Jackie, I can smack him if you want me to.
I will keep that in mind, Brad, but no. I'm 48. I'm probably young for Camera Club. Apart from you, you're a lot younger. But I know from the camera clubs that I've been involved, I'm probably more on the younger side. Probably not so much anymore when I first joined about 5 years ago. But I was the older one. And I was able to bring a lot to the students as well.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I was going to say perhaps the more mature one, but that's all right. But Jackie, what was the age of the others there roughly? Were they like teens or mid-20s, 30s? I'm just curious to know, because of the future for photography and the interest from the younger generations.
Well, when I was actually doing the Certificate 3 at Martin, they were all high school students, so all year 11, year 12 students. TAFE, the kids were, the people that were there were in their 20s. Not very many of them were under 20, so some of them were 25, 26, and some of them had degrees in different areas. One person had it in architectural design, one other person had a degree in marketing. So there's a whole heap of stuff, but it's definitely in their 20s. And their passion for photography was actually really unbelievable. I really enjoyed working with those kids. Well, kids. Not kids, but
yeah. That's. I find that really interesting, actually. That that interest is there. I think it's great. I think that's fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. And I believe they run a couple of diploma classes and the certificate for it, TAFE. So there is quite a few people that are there. But I'll be honest with you, it's a tough course. If you're passionate about it, you're going to do well. But if you're a little bit ordinary about it, then you'll probably struggle. It's actually pretty full on.
Yeah, I got it. I was lucky enough to be the judge with some of your photos, and I didn't realise they were yours until after the competition, of some of the work you put forward. And you also mentioned about how much time you put into some of those photos. And I was blown away by them, some of the portraiture stuff you'd done. And with your permission, I'd love to throw a couple up on the video channel, which I'll talk to you after the video about that.
Of course.
But how much time and work did you put into some of those photos? Because you could tell that it wasn't just rolling up into a studio, taking the photo and then throwing it up. It looked to me like there was a lot of control in some of those photos, which you actually did quite well in the comp. But how much work did you put into some of those photos that I'd seen?
Well, I guess, Brad, I've been doing portrait photography, and I have my little studio behind here. So this is where I do most of my stuff. To be honest, I don't actually put a lot of effort into it. So once you actually understand lighting, and I've got a small studio, which means I have to control the lighting even more so because of the fact that it bounces everywhere. Yep. And I've got such a small space to work with lighting. I didn't actually need to. It's more about planning about what you're wanting to achieve. I mean, one of the things that not only the diploma but the certificate has helped me to really understand is photograph with intent. Regardless of whatever photography you're taking, if you're photograph with intent, you're going to tell some sort of story. So portraiture, I just love. I mean, my backstory, Brad, you may know, Grant, you may not. I was an accountant prior to doing photography. I was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, and they'd given me very, very slim chance of survival. They told me I needed to find another hobby because I would be out of action for about 12 months. That turned out to be about 4 years. So I spent a lot of time doing a lot of stuff about, reading about photography, because photography has always been my love, but I never really delved into it, wasn't serious about it or anything else. But what I have found is, I remember looking at some photos and realising that I didn't have any of me at all. And I thought, my son was 9 at the time. He's 17 now, so I'm doing very well and all the rest of it. But I realised that I really wanted, how important is it to take those, capture those people, connections of people's expressions, that story. So for me, that's my passion for photography. I love every other genre as well, but I'm always drawn to portraiture.
Yeah, Jackie, you've touched on an area that's very dear to my heart. Actually, I probably could call myself a landscape sports photographer, I guess. But I love being in a studio. I absolutely adore it. From having that control of the light, I've been able to create. I much prefer to work within a studio than to, for example, do portraiture outside. And yeah, I just really, really love it. So my question is, what have you noticed the trends of late in portraiture? Because portraiture's often gone through trends and fads. We had a period where glam was the flavour of the month, and then goes to something else. So what are you seeing now that people are coming in for to want taken?
Well, I'm concentrating on families. So I do newborn photography, families, and it's a mixture of lifestyle, which is more authentic. So the trend at the moment is being real, authentic, authentic connections with people. Not over edited is become a very much a trend, and I think it's because people can put those silly filters on in their phones and all the rest of it that sort of does it. But it's very difficult, and I think for people who want to do photography professionally, there is only a very small market out there. People don't value people's work in regards to, what they want. So people are wanting lots of stuff for very little. They think that we've got to offer something different. But trends is definitely about authenticity, realism, genuine expressions and connections, rather than that whole glamour model type portrait. There's still a part of that, and there's still a lot of people, but I think that's very, very slim in comparison.
It's interesting that you mentioned the family portrait. I mean, years ago, my wife's father was Hans Weeveling, which is now Photo Lab on Fullerton Road. The family still run, and for years there, Hans did a lot of family portraiture work. In fact, I was only walking past a portrait last night, and I was looking at it. It was the typical 70s style portrait, the backdrop, the family group, and I thought, yeah, wow, that was really a thing back then. So I think that sort of died off for a number of years, because people can go out and take a snap with anything these days and get a half decent result. So it's interesting to hear you say that that people are looking for that again.
There is a more amount. It's more about the colours. Like for me, it's all about, there's a bit of a fad or a trend in editing style of everybody being, my class is orange. And that's very much a editing style at the moment. But for me, I steer away from that, because I'm trying to create timeless images when editing. So whilst I do have a backdrop, I do have several different backdrops, it's mainly the modern, more high key, white things that are going with people. Decor is what people are after. I take family portraits in the park, at the beach, all those sort of things as well. So there's a bit of everything, but I think there is still a need for studio photography, posed type images, but I think it's still important to create connections in the studio as well. So I might ask, their kids to hug their mum or their dad or something like that, and that's the connection they're getting, and that's the shots that I'm after, and that's what the family seem to love the most.
And isn't it great when you're working with people in a studio setting, and equally so not so great, or therein lies the challenge of making it great. But when you're working with people in a studio setting and it clicks, they start to perform, if I can use that term, for the camera, and the connection happens and it just flows, and it's a wonderful time if you can work with people where that all comes out.
Yeah, it is difficult when you've got little kids who find it a little difficult to sit still. So you got to have a bit of a process. It's not about asking someone to get in the studio, sit down and smile. It's all about talking to them and making them feel at ease. So yeah, you're right. There's definitely an art to that, at getting that connection, and it does flow. Sometimes it doesn't flow at all, and go back to the drawing board and start again. But that's just the way it is. So that's all.
Yeah. Yes, I've found when I used to do this up in Queensland a bit, I found that often my best shots came from very early in the shoot, and I would just mess around with the camera a bit, and they would be getting comfortable and settling in, and I'd say, look, I'm just test shooting a couple of things here. You just muse yourselves and just ignore me. And you'd go on shooting, and you get some wonderful shots out of that, maybe 10, 15 minutes time slot, to when you'd have to say, well, okay, folks, now we'll just keep going with this. And then they'd think, oh, so now it's serious. And then they'd start to pose and do things, and it would all sort of fall apart from that point forward. But some of those initial relaxed, unobserved shots were fantastic.
Oh, I use prompts, to be honest. So I might just say to if there's teenage kids or whatever, I always say, who's mum and dad's favourite child? And it's just that moment that everyone's looking, or look at mum and dad's favourite child, and they all look at that person. You just snap that. That's the connection. That's the fun moment. And that's what I'm looking for, rather than that sit down and look at the camera type thing.
Yeah.
Sure, it's nice to get a couple of those, but these shots are about finding those connections between family members or loved ones and connecting those. And that's my wanting to do. And that comes from my history, my health history. I mean, I was an accountant, a boring accountant before. So, definitely changed a big swing. And like I said, that connection, people, loved ones, all that sort of stuff is important. But equally important is my bird photography and landscapes and all the rest of it that I do, dabble in everything.
I think you've probably hit on it, Jackie. I'd see it in some people who retire, or whether you've got an illness or anything. I think the most important thing I've observed is having a hobby, whether it be photography or whatever it is. I've seen a lot of people, especially they've retired and they don't have something that they might go away on a trip, but when they come back, they got no hobbies or anything, and they sit at home and sort of just veg out. I find that either, especially if they're elderly, they start deteriorating and they fall. They fall into a hole.
What are you looking at me for?
Well, you were smiling at me, looking at me, so I was wondering whether I was saying something wrong. But I think you've hit on it. Whether you're like the same thing with an illness or anything like that, is that if you can get your mind off of things and get a hobby, like I said, whether it be photography or not, I think, it's a hobby of mine. It's it releases me from work, because I'll be on the farm all the time, and you have all sorts of things happen, and photography for me is a bit of an outlet where I can drop my guard and have a bit of fun. So I think you've just to touch on what you said earlier on, is that I think it is important, and it's great. I've seen a lot of your work, Jackie, and I've loved the work that you've done. So it's just fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So we're going to leave that episode right there. Make sure you catch the second part of this episode and check out Jackie's page, which is in the description below. And with that, we'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.